This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 310. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., and I'm recording out of Columbus, Ohio. And so for this one here, since we are, in another milestone episode, not a major one technically, but since it's episode 310, I'm going to do my top horror films from 1935. I actually have 25 horror films that I'm going to be including here. I think there might be 6 lost films. I'll also do some stats for that as well. So that'll be the feature here that I'll do. And then I also have mini reviews here. My 1995 Voyage to the Fives rewatch is going to be Embrace of the Vampire. I also gave a viewing to The Picture of Dorian Gray from 1945. That's a Voyage to the Fives, first time watch. And then I also have a screener of Forgive Us All. I tortured myself a little bit to prep for a documentary that I'm going to be watching at Nightmares Film Festival. And so I watched a Serbian film. And then my 2025 rewatch is going to be Shaman. I wanted something a little bit shorter so I could kind of get through it. And then I also have a documentary that I got as a screener of Chain Reactions. This is actually about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then I'll have one episode of American Horror Story Delicate. And then before I close out doing this intro here, I did want to read a press release because I actually got sent Martin Scorsese, the iconic filmmaker, and his work. This is done by Ian Nathan. I actually just recently had finished reading the David Lynch one, so this one came, and as you can tell by the video, I have accompanying this. So discover the genius of Martin Scorsese, one of cinema's greatest storytellers, in Martin Scorsese, the iconic filmmaker, and his work by Ian Nathan. For over 50 years, Scorsese has been one of cinema's most celebrated directors. From a Catholic kid in Manhattan to a legendary filmmaker, he shaped Hollywood with masterpieces such as Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, and The Irishman. But what makes a Scorsese film unique? His stories explore power, morality, and human nature, blending raw emotions with intellectual depth. Whether reinventing noir, musicals, or crime dramas, his work captures the pulse of America and the Italian-American experience. Author Nathan, one of UK's best-known film writers, dives into all 26 Scorsese films, breaking down the director's signature themes, iconic collaborations with Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, and his place in film history. A true cinephile and tireless preservationist, Scorsese continues to redefine the boundaries of filmmaking, proving that cinema is not merely entertainment, but a vital, expressive art form. Nathan explores how and why Scorsese's career has been shaped the language of modern film, with such works standing as a landmark expression of personal vision, cultural commentary, and cinematic innovation. So yeah, super cool. Very grateful here that I had this sent over to me. Thank you, Steve Roth from the Quartro Group. And yeah, so I definitely just wanted to go ahead and kind of read out that press release, show you a little bit of it in the video here. So I don't think there's anything I need to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming this journey with me. I have a great thing here that I wanted to go ahead and give you an offer for since it fell into my lap and wanted to go ahead and share it with you. I have been given a promo code here for shimmerwoodbeverages.com. These are CBD infused seltzers that are award winning. They have been twice recognized by Forbes as the #1 CBD beverage in the United States and the best lower potency option out there. It blends full spectrum CBD with local Maine fruits and cocktail bitters for bold flavors, crafted without added sugars, caffeine, or artificial ingredients stimulants, which if you know me, that is something that I prefer because I get enough of the caffeine and I'm trying to get away from sugars. So it's designed for relaxation without intoxicating effects, perfect straight from the can or a refreshing cocktail or mocktail base, depending on what you're looking for there. This has unique flavors like raz lime, chai cherry, ginger orange, and just hemp. Now, Simmerwood offers a health-conscious alternative to sugary sodas or alcohol, made to revive a calm, clear focus for natural stress relief. Each can contains 5 milligrams of full-spectrum CBD for a balancing, calming effect. So this one here is at, like I said, shimmerwood.com, and my promo code here for you listeners is actually you get 30% off of if you use my code, and this is, like I said, a great deal if you can go ahead and you want to do that, and my code is going to be Cinephile1. So if you want to check out more of the information or check out their site, there will be links in the show notes for you to check that out there. And for my first mini review here is going to be Embrace of the Vampire from 1995, directed by Anne Gorsod. This is written between Hallie Eaton, Nicole Chody, and Rick Betzelberger. This stars Alyssa Milano, Martin Kemp, and Harold Pruitt. This is from 1995, as I've already said that. I realize that now. This is a vampire horror thriller film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 4.4 on IMDb and a 2.2 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis here being an 18-year-old freshman is seduced by a handsome vampire lover who introduces her to the dark world of carnal desires. So I remember I picked this movie up because it had a topless Alyssa Milano, I'm not going to lie. So it would have been in college. Now, it went on a list of ones to see for my Voyage to the Fives here as a rewatch. I'm not entirely sure I've ever seen this film all the way through. If I did, I don't remember much of it from what I've already kind of shared here. So we got an interesting thing here. Is it starts off, though, where we have the vampire, who is Kemp, as he is meeting this princess portrayed by Rebecca Ferretti. And then she leaves, and then he's attacked by these nymphs portrayed by Glory Gold, Sina Ryan, and Sabrina Allen. And so then he ends up getting bit, becomes a vampire. And then he comes to his college campus where he's coming after Charlotte, portrayed by Milano. So I'm going to say is that this falls in that weird run in the 90s where they had all these erotic thrillers. Now, this would be the same time that films were coming out from Cinemax, like Doppelganger and Poison Ivy series. Milano did this film as another one with Gorsod. From what I can remember reading, or is trying to break out of her child star image. Now, from different actors that I've read about, getting typecast was something that would be frustrating if you want to kind of test what your abilities are as an actor or actress. So that set up, let me delve into more we're getting here. This portrays a tragic vampire who, despite initially resisting, embrace their nature. He boasts of countless victims and selfishly fears eternal sleep, while relentlessly searching for his lost loved soul. He uses his powers to separate Charlotte from her boyfriend of Chris, as he is portrayed by Pruitt. And so then, and also like the vampire trying to seduce her, also protects her from a scene as well that we get to see. So now we look at our lead character here. Casting Milano as a former child star as the virginal lead in this film is an interesting choice because you can juxtaposition it with her. She has all these sexually active characters around her, like Liza, who is a young Jordan Ladd. And then you also have Nicole, who is Rachel True. And it's also kind of interesting since she's trying to break out of this child star thing. This is like her kind of portraying that as she becomes who she does in this movie. Now, Charlotte is pressured by her boyfriend for sex, further seduced by this vampire as well. And then there's exploration of sexual experimentation in college, pulling in this like photographer character of Charlotte, who lives in her dorm, of Charlotte Lewis, who is portraying the character of Sarah, as she's also pulling her in that way. So I appreciate these different things we're doing here. Now I'm going to go ahead and shift gears here and look at the filmmaking aspects. There's this dreamlike atmosphere that works. The cinematography does well in capturing that, as does the framing. It's fitting because Charlotte is having these dreams influenced by this nightmare, and he's doing that to Chris as well, as he ends up doing this. There's this nightmare that Charlotte has of Marika, portrayed by Jennifer Tilly, and then we actually see that this stuff actually plays out, but there's a little bit more to it there. So I do like the exploration of sexual experimentation in college, pulling Charlotte in multiple directions as an appreciated concept. I'll then shift gears and we'll look at the filmmaking aspects. There's a dreamlike atmosphere here that works. The cinematography does well in capturing that, as does the framing. It is fitting because Charlotte is having her dreams influenced by the vampire. He is doing this to Chris as well. I will say we get limited effects. The more about the tone. I do like what they do with the subtle fingernails and teeth for the vampire. The soundtrack also fits without necessarily standing out. All that's left to be acting performances. Milano shines as a young woman seeking control amidst conflicting desires. Kemp embodies the stoic vampire, while Pruitt portrays a respectful yet curious college boyfriend. Ladd excels as the bully. We also here have True, Lewis, and Jennifer Tilly offer strong supporting performances. Nudity is present with Milano, Gold, Ryan, and Allen. The cast performs well despite the script's limitations. So in conclusion, this is a successful blend of erotic thriller elements with supernatural romance. Milano's performance anchors the film, portraying a young woman navigating a newfound desires. Despite a script with some limitations and minimal special effects, the dreamlike atmosphere, fitting cinematography, and strong supporting cast elevate the overall experience. This film serves as an interesting artifact of 90s cinema, particularly in his exploration of burgeoning sexuality and its place within the erotic thriller subgenre. So my rating here for Embrace of the Vampire is going to be a 6 out of 10. Then up next is going to be my Voyage to the Fives watch for 1945 of The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is from 1945, of course. This is directed by Albert Lewin, who also wrote this, and this is inspired by the story by Oscar Wilde. This stars George Sanders, Hurt Hatfield, and Donna Reed. This is a period drama, supernatural, fantasy, horror, mystery, romance, thriller film that is from, I believe this is in the United States. From the United States. I mean, this is an MGM film, now I'm thinking about it. But this is currently sitting on a 7.5 on IMDb and a 3.6 on Letterboxd with a synopsis being: a corrupt young man somehow keeps his youthful beauty, but a special painting gradually reveals his inner ugliness to all. So it's a classic story that I've actually read while I was living in Cleveland. I found the book cheaply and decided that, this is a beloved tale from Wilde. I don't believe that I've actually seen any film adaptations before outside of just the Showtime show Penny Dreadful, which featured this as a character. I was intrigued to check this out as a Voyage to the Fives film. So where I'm going to start then is I had saw that some people had issues with this one because I feel like it's tamed down and they're kind of skipping over some of the parts that we don't necessarily see the debauchery done by Dorian, who is portrayed by Hatfield. I feel that Wilde faced censorship, or I saw that he faced censorship issues, so his work wasn't even fully what he wanted. I'm not shocked that this came out when it did, a bit tamer. It would be difficult to show some of these things and present it to a mainstream audience, so I did want to say my piece on that. With that set up then, let's look at our lead character here. For the first half, this is a character study of Dorian. The film's stoic portrayal of this usually emotional character from the novel, particularly his cold reaction to what happens with Sybil Vane, portrayed by Angela Lansbury. It's an interesting change. Dorian's susceptibility to Lord Henry Wotton, who's portrayed by Sanders, his influence resonates, reminded me of some regrettable peer pressure decisions that I've made. So the hints of the past deeds are intriguing, leaving room for doubt. So Hatfield's performance is captivating. It is then the second half where the characters question Dorian. There is his friend Basil, who actually does the painting of Basil Hallward, portrayed by Lowell Gilmore. It's kind of interesting is that he doesn't want him to marry Gladys. So this is when things have jumped into the future. That's Gladys Hallwell, portrayed by Reed. What's kind of interesting there is that she was a little girl who had a crush on Dorian, and now he still looks youthful and everything like that. So Basil has heard stories and rumors. He doesn't want him to corrupt his niece. There's also David Stone, portrayed by Peter Lawford, who is in love with Gladys. I think they might be engaged. But, she's in love, of course, with Dorian, starting her infatuation as a child. We also see that Dorian is in public. There's people whispering. He doesn't seem fazed, which is great. I also like that Harry, who is a tamer version of Dorian, pushes his friend to do things. These supporting characters help bring this tale to life. I should then discuss the acting performances. I've already given praise to Hatfield as our titular character. I like Sanders and Gilmore as his two friends. They're almost like good and evil to our Dorian. Reed is quite attractive. I like the long gazes that Dorian gives to her, and he almost sees her as the ultimate conquest after he's changed. And I also say that she also has her longing gazes back at him. It is wild to see a young Angela Lansbury here. She's great, and she gets to sing and everything like that. Not shocked because I know she does that in Beauty and the Beast. So she's the one that drives Dorian to madness. I'd say that the rest of the cast round this out for what was needed, with special credit here to Cedric Hardwicke as our narrator. Circling back to the story elements, there are a few themes that I want to bring up. There's this concept of appearance versus reality, as well as the pursuit of eternal youth and beauty. I love this image takes all on the bad things, almost like it's his conscience. We are seeing the price of moral corruption, living in decadence, and how it affects the soul. You can call it vanity and narcissism. Also, have to be filmmaking techniques. The cinematography and framing are good. It is limited by the era that it was made, but we get some great shots. There are many that utilize mirrors. I do like the idea of the duality of humans with that. I'm also a fan when you shoot this from the level, the ground level, up to the room where the portrait is being kept. The best part would be the painting itself. I love how we see it a few times in full color. This is a black and white film outside of that. Seeing the negative things it takes on is eerie and great to see, other than that the soundtrack fit for what was needed. So in conclusion, this offers a compelling, albeit tame, adaptation of Wilde's classic. Despite some criticism regarding the portrayal of Dorian's debauchery, the film excels as a character study, particularly through Hatfield's captivating performance. The supporting cast, especially Lansbury and Sanders, enhance the narrative. The film skillfully explores themes of appearance versus reality, the pursuit of eternal youth, and the corrupting power of vanity, all visually underscored by effective cinematography and the striking colorized depiction of the evolving portrait. Overall, this is a well-crafted cinematic journey into the soul of a man undone by his own desires. So my rating here for The Picture of Dorian Gray is going to be an 8 out of 10. Then up next here, I have a screener of Forgive Us All from 2025. This is written and co-written and directed by Jordana Stott. This was written with Lance Giles. This is starring Lily Sullivan, Callan Mulvey, and Richard Roxburgh. This is a drama horror western film that is from New Zealand. It is currently sitting on a 4.4 on IMDb and a 2.8 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being: in a post-apocalyptic world, a virus has transformed humans into violently deranged cannibals. A bereaved mother has lost everything and takes refuge in an isolated mountain cabin until a desperate, wounded stranger with a story of hope. So I got a chance to see this thanks to Keir from Strike Media. He sent over a press release which intrigued me knowing that this was a 2025 horror film. It also doubled for a horror movie challenge as I needed a post-apocalyptic setting and I also needed one with zombies. Other than that information, I came into this one blind. So, I mean, yeah, this is a zombie-ish film. We learned that in the first, opening sequence, so there's that. And it's not like it's a hidden reveal. So this is an interesting take on this subgenre. It isn't new, as we're seeing a post-apocalyptic world. Feels like later seasons of The Walking Dead or the spin-off Fear the Walking Dead, where the world reverted to the Old West with the fall of society. There is part of the story that I enjoyed there. Mixing Western elements in the horror tends to work when, and then having zombies had me intrigued as well. What I want to start is that we have this interesting kind of tale here of what we see in the opening sequence for Rory, who is portrayed by Sullivan. She's trying to deal with the grief of losing her family. She carries that guilt, and she's considering hard to end it. She doesn't like that her father-in-law of Otto, portrayed by Roxburgh, is treating her so kindly. She points out that they're no longer related. Part of that is blaming herself. She's also lonely since the world has ended. There's also this feeling of regret that she's projecting on this character that we meet here of Noah, portrayed by Lance Giles. And Rory sees her chance at redemption. I did think that Sullivan did well in her performance. Now, I do want to discuss something that's underutilized, such as this camp. It's called the GMA, and this is where Logan, who's portrayed by Mulvey, it's where him and his crew come from. Now, Noah steals an antidote and is pursued by Logan with his team. Now, Logan clashes with Scout, who's part of that, who's Bree Peters, over a broken protocol. Logan's determination to catch Noah puts them at risk, and she's not willing to do that. The camp's acquisition of the antidote is underutilized. Logan warns Otto about a new law implying that Otto's current living situation is no longer permissible. More details are needed to flesh out the story. Let's then take a look at the filmmaking aspects. Cinematography and framing with the washed-out, bleak look are positives. Limited characters suit the isolated setting, creating a sense of emptiness. While effects for the howlers, which are what the zombies are called in this one, were good, more depth was needed to establish their threat. The main issue is the slow pacing despite a good runtime. The film meanders after the setup, causing interest for me to wane. All that's left then to be acting performances. I've already said that I thought that Sullivan was solid. Roxburgh is good as her father-in-law. Rory is closed off, but he's still there for her. I appreciate the Otto character. Now, Mulvey works as the villain. I like that his cohorts follow with what he says for the most part. There's some good growth of the story that Peter stands up to him. Giles works in his role. Credit all those that play howlers. How they looked and acted was creepy. In conclusion, this offers an intriguing blend of Western and zombie horror in a post-apocalyptic setting, anchored by Sullivan's strong performance as a grieving mother seeking redemption. While the film presents an interesting take on this genre and boasts some solid acting across the board, particularly from Roxburgh and Mulvey, it ultimately suffers from underutilized world-building elements and a meandering pace after its initial setup. Despite a good creature effects and a bleak effective visual style, a lack of depth in the dynamics and Howler's threat diminishes its overall impact. So I still rather enjoyed this enough. So I end up giving Forgive Us All a 6.5 out of 10, and I believe this should be hitting streaming here relatively soon if it's not already. And one that I was not necessarily excited to check out, but has been on my list for a while, and I finally took it off, and I'll get into why, but a Serbian film. This goes by the original title of Srpski Film. This is from 2010, directed by Srđan Spazajek, who also co-wrote this with Aleksandar Rajovejic. Now this stars Srđan Zika Todorovic, Sergej Trifovic, and Jelena Gavrilovic. And then this is a showbiz drama, splatter, suspense, mystery, horror thriller film that is from Serbia. Currently sitting on a 4.9 on IMDb and a 1.8 on Letterboxd, or Synopsis. An aging porn star agrees to participate in an art film in order to make a clean break from the business, only to discover he's drawn into a maelstrom of unbelievable cruelty and mayhem. So, like I said, been on my list for a while. I've held off for a variety of reasons. What made me watch this is I go into the Nightmares Film Festival. They're showing a new documentary called a Serbian documentary about this movie. So I want to be prepared by actually having knocked off this extreme movie. I've heard a variety of shows break this down and discuss it, so I was prepared as much as I could be. I will say I had this worse in my head than what it actually ended up being. Not to say that this isn't unpleasant or anything like that, but I just kind of want to preface that before people kind of get up in arms as anybody does. What I will say is that this is not an easy watch. The film is heavy, both what we see and the subject matter. It's an unpleasant watch that made me feel empty inside after seeing it. There's some interesting correlation here to our main character, who is Milos, portrayed by Todorovic, and his family, kind of what happens there. So this film is well made, which makes it watchable, especially with little things they do to make it less graphic, leaving it up to our imagination, which makes it unsettling, and it could be worse for some people. Let's then kind of jump into something I heard from the director, and kind of some of the things that he's trying to say this movie's trying to get across. While art is open to interpretation, I would say the director of Spazojevic, and to a lesser degree his co-writer of Radja Ovjic, I'm mispronouncing your guy's name, I do apologize. They claim that the extreme acts in this film are a comment on Serbian life. I believe that there are elements of that here. However, I do believe this is created, it's shock for shock's sake, for some of the more extreme things that we get. Now that out of the way, I can see a commentary here. The biggest thing to me is the difficulty of those in the adult entertainment industry and trying to get out. Milos is semi-famous, with reverence from characters like Vukmir, who is the director that he ends up working here, portrayed by Trifonovic. And then you also have another female porn star here of Lija, portrayed by Katarina Zutik, as well as his own brother of Marko, portrayed by Slobodan Bestik. It does seem like that Milos' wife of Marija, portrayed by Gravilovic, loves Milos. She doesn't necessarily like what he does, but his prospects aren't necessarily there because of the route he went. There's difficulty about finding a career that would pay the same. I could see this being hard to find work if he was recognized. It also seems a bit soul-crushing and demeaning. I did enjoy the angle that we get there with that. Then there's also the seedy role that Milos accepts. He doesn't know anything about the director or his crew. Milos makes a call to his brother to have him checked out. The information comes back as disturbing. It also makes sense to the depravity that we see later. I would say this is due to being in Serbia. I could also see this happening anywhere, to be honest. If anything, this feels more like the dark side of the adult industry and how sick people are out there, especially those that have quite a bit of money. I'm going to go ahead and shift over to discussing the structure of the story. The film effectively uses frequent adult film depictions starring Milos to jar the viewer, and this starts early. I mean, there's even an opening scene where his son of Peter is watching one of his films. Milos doesn't see anything wrong with it, but his wife does. Nudity is primarily topless women and backsides of both men and women, but they shot this stuff at creative angles. A growing discomfort culminates in a gut punch moments, especially from the climax. The production crew is so effectively villainized that Milos' eventual violence against them is satisfying, similar to something you'd get from The Last House on the Left or I Spit on Your Grave. Now, the last couple of themes to just kind of toss out there would be the loss of innocence. This is depicted with a teen girl that is always around on set, it seems like. You can also see that when the boy of Peter is watching the adult film, there are conversations with his parents about it afterwards that seem a little bit too progressive for his age. There's one that I didn't think of until reading up, that the people who are filming this might actually be police officers. Vukmir might also be more connected with the government still than I realized. Regardless, there are rich people paying for these depraved films, which is a common theme for that material. Now, I've jumped into filmmaking aspects slightly, so let's finish that out. I think the cinematography and framing here are brilliant. The latter for hiding things to allow the imagination to fill in blanks is great. I was impressed there. I'd also say that the editing and sound design helped to build the disgusting feeling that this film gives. The effects are brutally realistic, so credit there. There's some subtle things that are done that sicken me, but this is well made that it makes you feel unpleasant without necessarily seeing everything. All it's left then to be the acting performances. Todorovic is great as our lead. He's torn between what he can do in the beginning. Providing for his family with the agreement of Marija is good. There's a look at capitalism there. Gravilovic and the actor who plays Petar feel like a family. Trifonovic is great as his villainous director. His crew of henchmen are scary with how they're enjoying what they're doing. Bestik is creepy and hiding things that he does. Zutik and the rest of the cast round us out for what was needed. In conclusion, this is undeniably difficult to watch. filled with disturbing imagery and an unsettling narrative that leaves a lasting impression. While the filmmakers claim a social commentary on Serbian life, the film often veers into shock for shock's sake. Despite its repulsive content, the movie is remarkably well crafted, employing clever cinematography, editing, and sound design to amplify its unsettling atmosphere. The performances, particularly from Todorovic's portrayal of a man trapped in a moral descent, are commendable. Ultimately, it's a film that pushes boundaries and challenges viewers, with its effectiveness lying in its ability to disturb rather than enlighten. So my rating here for a Serbian film, I'm actually fairly high on this one after one watch. It's going to be an 8.5 out of 10. Not sure I'll ever come back to it, but never say never. And then my last feature that I'm going to be covering here is going to be Shaman. This is from 2025. Now, this is directed by Antonio Negrete and then written by Daniel Negrete. Now, this stars Sarah Canning, Daniel Gillies, and Jack Klein. This is a folk supernatural horror film that is a co-production of the United States and Ecuador. This is currently sitting on a 4.4 on IMDb and a 2.5 on Letterboxd, or a synopsis being: a missionary converting an indigenous community in a remote Ecuadorian volcano community must come to terms with her own faith, where her son is possessed by dark forces. So this one, if you'd like to hear a mini review, is going to be episode 295, which was my top horror films from 1925. So that was one of the mini reviews that I had over on that one. So I'm going to go a little bit brief with this one, obviously, for that. And so for this one here, I enjoy some of the plot elements, the themes, filming techniques, and acting performances. Now, I discovered this because this was at Raindance Film Festival, so I appreciate his exploration of folk horror and a clash between old and new beliefs here in this remote Ecuadorian village. So we are following Candace, who is portrayed by Canning, as she is a missionary, as her faith is tested with her son Elliot, who is portrayed by Klein, becomes possessed by dark forces after entering a cursed cave. The narrative highlights a tension between missionaries and the indigenous community, particularly the local shaman. Also with her is her husband and Elliot's father, Joel, portrayed by Gillies. So I do like the effective use of folk horror tropes and exploration of pagan ideas within a village divided by traditional and modern beliefs. We also have faith and hypocrisy. Candace's struggle with her faith as she attempts to maintain a perfect image, and her misguided anger towards the shaman are central to the film's thematic depth. There's also parallels here between like Christian rituals and indigenous faith. There's also parental instincts here we kind of see with Candace's desperate efforts to help her son, even if it means resorting to non-Christian practices. They're presented as a relatable aspect of parental love. And then for filmmaking here, we have some strong cinematography. I love these background shots where we have the volcano like looming and this remote village setting are effective in establishing the atmosphere. The cave's also quite creepy in what they do with that. And then we also have some elements. I don't necessarily love the jump scares, but I do think we have an unsettling atmosphere, and the sound design helps as well. Now, there is some CGI weakness here, as that we have possession sequences are very generic feeling, relying on unconvincing CGI, which is a minor drawback for me. I do find it interesting, though, that the boy here of Elliot will come into a room and he'll look possessed and everything. He'll come back later and he's completely normal. So I do love how they're kind of playing with what's real and what's not. I would say that as our main family, Gillies as Joel, Canning as Candace, and Klein as Elliot, they're pretty solid in their portrayals, particularly Canning's nuanced performances and Klein's effectiveness as a possessed teen. Supporting cast here, we have Alejandro Fajardo, Mercy Lima, and Alessandro Morales are all solid in their kind of thing. I also kind of really like Fajardo plays Father Myers, and his fallibility is an interesting layer as we get to see that he might be battling addiction himself. So for this one, I think it's commendable effort that thoughtfully blends cultural specificity with universal themes, despite some minor flaws with the CGI. So for me, this one, I'm saying the same rating and everything. I actually realized the ending is more bleak than I had remembered, so I did appreciate that. So my rating, though, for Shaman after both watches is going to be a 7 out of 10. Then I have a documentary I got to cover as a screener here of Chain Reactions. This is from 2024, getting its wide release here this year. Now, this is written and directed by Alexander O. Filippi. And then we have, this is featuring Patton Oswalt, Takashi Miike, and Alexandra Heller-Nichols, while also having Stephen King and Karen Kusama. So this one is a horror documentary that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 7.1 on IMDb, and a 3.5 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being the Texas Chainsaw Massacre's impact on 5 artists and its enduring legacy. So this is one that I learned about when Annalise from Strike Media reached out to see if I'd be interested in the screener, and I agreed. Documentaries are something I tend to put on while I'm working, later in the day, and treat it like a podcast. When something specifically interesting pops up, I'll go ahead and watch it. Now, I did know that Oswalt was featured in this, didn't necessarily know the others were, so that was kind of a pleasant surprise. So it's told in 5 chapters. The first is Oswalt, as he is followed by Jack Japanese director, legendary one, Takashi Miike. Then we have Alexandra Heller-Nichols, who's an Australian filmmaker. Then there's the legend Stephen King. Should go without, needing to be introduced outside of that. Our final chapter is then another director that I'm a fan of Kusama. I will say here is that I wasn't fully expecting someone like Oswald to be featured since he's a comedian, but everybody has such insightful things to say. It made me want to give a rewatch to the classic to kind of see what they brought up and kind of correlate it to what my thoughts are. Something I'll also include here is that Oswald says that we all watch movies differently. He brings up a story about going to see The Silence of the Lambs with an ex-girlfriend and her mother. He was taken aback by how well it was done, and her mother kind of focused on how James Gumb, the Buffalo Bill character, how he had pierced nipples. That set the stage for this doc for me, and fitting to kind of hear the different perspectives from these people. Find other things interesting here is this impact that it had on these people who work in the genre. Miike claims that he was going to go see City Lights, the Charlie Chaplin film, when he was 15 years old, and we might never have the filmmaker if he would have went to see that, as he instead saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Heller-Nichols was talking about how the original print of the film made her think of films from her own country. It also was kind of interesting that Texas kind of is very similar to the Outback. King didn't see this film until years after its release, and it was an interesting perspective that he gives there. Kusama focuses on filmmaking, comparing it to other legendary filmmakers. Now, this is interesting. All this made me appreciate what it was doing. There are documentaries that focus on the cast and crew, so it's also kind of getting tougher because a lot of them have passed away. We also have one here where that it brings up the lasting legacy of the film. This is a unique perspective of showing this as a direct impact on these individuals. I'll also shift over to filmmaking. I love the references they make and how they edit in footage to show what they're talking about. It also helps to make more sense. The cinematography and framing here were amazing, so that helps. And the last thing to bring up before closing out with my final thoughts is made me think of how the first time my mother showed me this, which is a VHS tape, guessing it was recorded off the television broadcast because it was handwritten. I also feel like I'm in the club there who have kind of seen this beloved film in a less traditional sense. So in conclusion, this offers a compelling and unique perspective on the enduring influence of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. By focusing on the personal impact, this has a diverse group of artists, Oswald, Miike, Heller-Nichols, King, and Kusama. The documentary moves beyond traditional perspectives. The insightful commentary coupled with excellent filmmaking that weaves in a relevant footage and strong cinematography makes this a standout. For fans of horror and film history, it's a valuable exploration of the classic's legacy, resonating with those who, like the reviewer, share a deep appreciation for the iconic horror film. That is me, the reviewer. So my rating here for Chain Reactions is going to be an 8 out of 10. Then I'm end these mini reviews out here with an American Horror Story Season 12 Delicate episode here of Little Gold Man. This is directed by Jennifer Lynch, and the synopsis: the world around Anna is starting to crescendo in every way. Her career path continues to skyrocket, while her personal life is more stressful than ever, just in time for Hollywood's big night. So this actually starts off very interesting. Going back to something I talked about with Rosemary's Baby, we actually start off with Frank Sinatra and Mia Farrow are in a little cafe. They were married, which I did look it up. That is correct. I completely forgot that. Now, he wanted her to give up her career so she could be a mother. So what's ironic is that they're using this is back in 1967, Rosemary's Baby. We also have like Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate. Then obviously there was like the ritual killings that kind of happened there that might also be kind of factoring in here. And I also love how this is correlating to the auteur in the present. So I love this revisionist type of thing that American Horror Story loves to do, of incorporating that in here. And then, of course, we have a certain character that I'm not going to reveal here. I already kind of figured she was involved in something, but she's here. And we also get to learn a little bit more here that Dexter, the husband here, who is portrayed by Matt Cesare. Now, he has been having an affair, not necessarily who his wife of Anna, portrayed by Emma Roberts, thought it was, and kind of interesting how that actually correlates back to Anna. So there's also something really kind of weird here that's going on with Anna thinking she had scaly legs. It kind of almost looks like she might be a demon, maybe a snake, maybe the devil or a demon, something along those lines. I do like that. And now Anna has to make a monumental decision. She either has to agree to do something, give up her baby potentially, and to win the Oscar. I kind of like where this is going. I'm kind of interested. Now I just have the season finale here to kind of watch, and I end up giving Little Gold Man a 7.5 out of 10. So that's all I've here then for my mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over to a brief break before I get into my main event here, my top horror films from 1935.
Hey, I'm Jill, the host of the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. Every other week, I feature a true crime book by one of my favorite authors, telling you the story with respect for the victims and loved ones. But I don't stop there. A psychology educator who's also studied serial killers, I analyze the cases and I endeavor to explain the whys. Why do people do this? Told in trilogies, Part 3 is dubbed Second Cast, where I cast a wider net going into some surprising, bone-chilling directions. Cold cases, homicides, missing persons, serial killers, and stories from history. These both fascinate and appall us. This is a true crime book club, so read with me or let me read for you. Join the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast and see what I'm pulling off the murder shelf next.
And welcome here to the main event. Sorry about my voice when I'm recording this section here. It has been a rough morning. What I will say, though, is that this is going to be my top horror films of 1935. So I had 25 eligible films. That was 30.5 hours worth of movies. Then there's 25 directors, 6 countries, and 3 languages. So then the other popular genre would be mystery. There was 9 films of that. Drama, we had 8 films. Sci-fi 5. Thriller and fantasy at 4. Crime, adventure, romance coming in at 3. The United Kingdom was the only other country that was behind the United States that had, they had 4 films. And then Switzerland and Mexico had 2. And then the other language is going to be German at 3 and Spanish at 2 films behind English. We had a good handful of themes and nanogenres. I'm not going to run through those just because they get very wordy. Now, there were a good number of actors who were in multiple films. We had Bela Lugosi with 5, Boris Karloff with 4. Then we had Valerie Hobson with 3. And then a bunch of people with 2, like Manuel Noriega, J.M. Kerrigan, Lester Matthews, Walter Kingsford, E.E. Clive, Ethel Griffiths, Robert Allen, Edward Van Sloan, Dennis Hoey, Colin Clive, Henry Colker, Elsa Lanchester, Robert Middlemass, Francis Drake, D.J. Williams, Dwight Fry, Zeffie Tilbury, Torben Meyer, Anne Darling, and Quentin McPherson. Then only one director did multiple films. That'd be Stuart Walker. I think that one might be a little bit of a cheat. I'll kind of figure that out here. So then, according to Letterboxd, though, the highest average and the most popular is Bride of Frankenstein at 4.0. The lowest average is Murder by Television at 2.5. Most obscure is The Demon of the Himalayas. The newest is technically Monsters of the Sea, aka The Sea Fiend. That one's a little bit weird just because there's kind of multiple releases and different versions of that one. Then the oldest is Forbidden Adventure. The longest is The Ghost Goes West at 95 minutes. And then the shortest is Murder by Television at 53 minutes. So then from there, let me just jump over then. Let's jump into those lost films. And first is going to be Obeah. So this one is directed by and written by F. Herrick Herrick. This stars Phillips Lord, Gene Brooks, and Alice Wessler. So this one is from, let me double check here real quick, the United States. This one is a sailor searching for a lost American explorer, discovers him being held hostage on a remote island in the South Sea. The man held captive by the island's natives who have placed him under a voodoo spell known as Obeah. This actually kind of sounds a lot like The Sea Fiend, just a little bit kind of different there. There's, according to 13 people on IMDb, this is a 4.0, and then there's 2 people that have rated it. It looks like there's at least 2 ratings on Letterboxd, so it's either a half star to a 1 star over there. So this one here is believed to be lost and the first film of Gene Brooks. So that's all I really have for this one. It does kind of sound a little bit interesting, just kind of some of those elements, especially being lost at sea and everything like that. But that is the first lost film that I'll be covering here. Then up next is going to be a little bit one that's kind of difficult to find, and the reason being is it goes by the name of The Devil of the Sea, or the original title of El Diablo del Mar. So this is directed by Juan Duval. So this is actually the Spanish language version of another one that's going to be on this episode. So I'm going to just kind of, the synopsis is a ship disappears without a trace. What happened to the crew? Years later, there's news of possible survivors, and soon a rescue team is setting sail. Eventually they discover a young man living on a remote island, and they ask him to leave with them. He refuses, so they abduct him, but he does get his revenge and guides them to the lair of the Devil of the Deep, the alternate language version of The Sea Fiend. So this version actually stars Ramon Parida, Mo Vida, Barry Norton, Carlos Valeris, Carmen Bailey, Julia Bejuarno, and Antonio Cabrera. And then this one is, there's a handful of writers here like S. Edwin Graham. Duvall also helped there. We have Manuel Paris, Thelma Brooks, and Terry Gray. So that's all I'm going to do here for this one then, just because this one, I will actually be covering it rather soon. But this is kind of in the same vein as what Universal did with Dracula, having, during the day they would film the American or the English version, and then in the evening they would film the Spanish language version. Then the next one I have here is going to be, the English title is The Wedding Night, but the original title is Sadi Kairat. This is directed by Mohan Dharma Bhavani. This stars Nargis S.B. Nayapali, and Fatih Parasad. This is from India. And let me see if there's any more over on Letterboxd for this one here. Is that this one, though, the synopsis is the story revolves around the life of a kind and sweet girl living with her family, and her family wanted a fortune for her and arranged her marriage with a kind man. They meet before their marriage and falls in love with each other, but things get complicated on their wedding night, which causes their life into trouble, but fate plays its role, leading to consequences. So this one, I mean, the biggest thing for me is just that being able to see films that are from like in other countries this early is something that really kind of intrigues me, just to kind of see what they were doing then and whatnot. So, yep, this is one that does seem to be a lost film. Not fully surprised just for the era, how film stock wasn't necessarily taken care of all that well, and then, I mean, with how film wasn't necessarily as revered as of yet. So, yeah, so this one is unfortunately not going to be seen. And then there's The Burgermeister. This also goes by another title, and I'm trying to see if I can figure out what that one was, but I'll get back to that. But this is a crime drama horror film that was directed by Harry Southwell. This is written by Denzel Batchelor. Now, this also stars Southwell, Muriel Meredith, and Janet Johnson. This is from Australia, and let me see if I can also... It was actually a remake of the movie The Bells, so that's actually kind of an interesting thing there. Yeah, there was Flames of Conscience was the other title. This has 14 people are rating this as a 3.2 on IMDb. No ratings over on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being: a burgermeister and a family man is haunted by a crime he committed 15 years before, robbing a wealthy Jewish-Polish seed merchant to pay off his mortgage debt. So kind of an interesting little concept there. Kind of curious to see what would kind of play out and kind of factored in there. So, yep, this is one, again, being a foreign film definitely kind of makes it a little bit higher on my list of ones that I wish I could see. And the only bit of trivia I could find this one is that only a single sequence is known to survive of this film. Then there is Beyond Death, which also goes by the original title of Más allá de la muerte. This is written and directed by Ramon Peon and Adela Sanquario. And then Sanquario also stars in this with Miguel Arias and Mario Tenorio. This is a drama romance according to IMDb. I believe probably on Letterboxd they have this as horror. This is a Mexican film. There are no ratings on IMDb, and then over on Letterboxd there's just one that has a 2.5 star, and then some other ones over there. But this is listed as lost, with the synopsis being: a scientist discovers a formula to revive the dead, which triggers a series of unexpected and terrifying events. So again, because this one's a foreign one, that kind of makes it a little bit higher on my list. So a bummer that this one is lost. Then we have Singaro. This one is directed by S.N. Behendi and then stars Pushpa. Actually, let me go and see if there's anything over on the... And then this also looks like... doesn't have a writer listed, but this also stars Galoob and Naeem Pala, as well as Nazir, Mansoor, Sohara, and Anwari. So this one here, I believe, is going to end up being from India. And no ratings on IMDb. Same thing over on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being: a scientist who is portrayed by Naeem Pala turns himself into a monster in the story based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So not kind of shocked to see that. Would like to be able to check this one out just because of being a foreign, take on that classic story. And the last one I wasn't able to find on the IMDb pages for it, so I'm just going to use what's on Letterboxd, and this is Kismat Ki Bul. This is directed by D.K. Kale. And let's see if we have any other people here. Nope. And then this is starring also Nama Yampali, Lobo, Gadsi, Omkar, Vatsala Joshi, Susali, and Leela Davi. So this one is a horror film that is from India as well. And this one, the synopsis is loosely based on The Mummy from 1932. So this looks like dating all the way back to the 30s, that India was doing their own kind of remakes on popular films in the United States. So again, because this is foreign, would be quite interesting to check this version of The Mummy out that is from another country. And then let's start doing the list here. So I'm going to do my 25 through 20 for this little section here, and then I'll start breaking everything down from everything. Actually, no, I'm going to do it from 25 to 21, so that way it'll be 5, and then I can kind of get on track going forward there. And so the first one, my number 25, the bottom on this one's going to be The Sea Fiend. So this one was a featured review on episode 301, if you're kind of curious to hear a little bit more about that. And so The Sea Fiend is directed by Edwin Graham, and written by Juan Duval as well as Graham. It stars Barry Norton, Blanche Mahaffey, and Jack Barty. So this one, there seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy in the release year, with IMDb listed as 1935. Letterboxd has it at 36, which is kind of interesting because I've already brought up how the Spanish language version was 1935. There's also a reissue version called Devil Monster from 1946. So the story follows Robert Jackson, who's portrayed by Norton, who agrees to join his father's crew to search for his best friend Jose Francisco, who is portrayed by Jack Del Rio. So now he disappeared at sea years ago. Robert's motivation are partially selfish, as he hopes to win the affection of Jose's former lover of Luis, portrayed by Mahaffey. Their search leads them to an island where they find Jose, who is about to marry the chief's daughter. She is Maya, portrayed by Maya Owali. Now, Jose is known for supposedly killing a devilfish that made him that's made fishing difficult in the areas, and they kind of like revere him as a great like hunter fisher type thing. But Robert and his crew forcibly take Jose with them, which leads to hunting grounds of this large sea creature. So I found this one to have a promising premise, but ultimately falls short due to excessive stock footage, a drawn out narrative, and wooden acting, with the exception of Norton. So the devilfish is depicted practically by a giant devil ray. I appreciate what they're doing there. It just appears too late in the film. I'm guessing is that because they went practical with it, it's probably difficult to do, and it probably fell apart soon after, so they got what they could get. Now, the story also includes a revenge subplot where Jose, after being kidnapped, directs a crew to a dangerous fishing area known for a devilfish being present. So the acting is generally not great here, though Barty he's pretty solid here as a stern captain as well. Filmmaking, I think that it's fine for the cinematography and the editing, especially incorporating in stock footage. There's just way more of that than there really is for like movie that we get here, and the soundtrack doesn't stand out for me. So my rating here then, as coming in at number 25, is going to be a 3 out of 10. And then coming in at number 24 is going to be Anchor, aka Forbidden Adventure. I believe that was what the name is. Let me make sure. Yes, that's Forbidden Adventure was the alternate title for this one. So this one is a featured review if you'd like to hear about that on episode 305. And this one here was directed by George M. Merrick and L.C. Cook. Merrick also wrote this one. Now it stars Wilfred Lucas, J.S. Horn, and Fred Humes, and there's also a producer here that's uncredited in the summary of Dwayne Esper. So this kind of falls into some of those like shock films that he was making in this era. So this is basically a travelogue that blends World War I footage, like era footage of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, shot by explorers, with additional scenes filmed on a Hollywood set. It follows Wilfred Lucas playing himself and J.S. Horn playing himself as they search for Angkor Wat to understand why the population disappeared. They encounter local dances, wild animals, and a gorilla. So while listed as horror on Letterboxd, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a traditional film in that genre, despite the scenes of like deadly animals and a woman being mauled. There's the inclusion of a man in a gorilla suit also featured, and those ape films kind of borderline into it. So the documentary footage, believed to be World War I, is noted for its historical significance and early camera equipment. Merrick's involvement is highlighted particularly by his association with Esper, known for exploitative like drug scare films. Merrick's use of like nude natives, reportedly are actually brothel workers, to attract audiences is something else that I wanted to include here. So I also note that there's some intercutting and overlaying of effects, though sometimes inconsistently. The narration makes it feel more like a documentary. So for performances here, I think that the acting of the explorers of Lucas and Horn, they're fine. They feel realistic. The native women are described, I think they're solid, believable in Cambodia. Fred Humes' performance in the gorilla suit is also noted, contrasting with what might have been real gorilla footage early on from what I'm kind of possible. I'm not 100% sure, though. So I find this fascinating more for its historical significance and exploitative filmmaking tactics than as genre or narrative. It is, for me, kind of a unique glimpse into early documentary-style adventure films, blurring the lines between documentary, exploitation, and narrative. So my rating actually quite a bit jump up from the previous one here is I actually gave Anchor, which I have as my 24th film here, as a 4.5 out of 10. And then coming in at number 23 as a feature review as well is going to be One Frightened Night, which if you'd like to hear a feature review that I was saying here is going to be episode 290. So this one here is directed by Christy Caban and then written by Wellman Topman. This stars Charlie Grapewin, Mary Carlisle, and Arthur Holm. So the synopsis here is an eccentric millionaire, Jasper White, facing a declining health and a new estate tax, plans to distribute his inheritance early among a group of acquaintances and distant relatives since he can't locate his granddaughter Doris, who he wants to leave everything to. During a stormy night at his manor, the power goes out and two different women arrive, both claiming to be Doris. This leads to complications, including the murder of the first woman claiming to be Doris, and then we have Sheriff Jenks and Deputy Abner investigate as suspicion falls on the various guests, all of whom have motives centered around the inheritance. So this one I actually watched as a part of my Voyage to the Five series. I like this old dark house setting and the confined location, the storm, and the mystery of who committed the murder among a cast of morally ambiguous characters, all motivated by money. I like the concept here of the tunnel across the rooms, even though I don't feel like that's fully utilized. So this does feel a little bit generic, doesn't necessarily stand out compared to other films of the era that handle similar themes better. So I have some issues here, including like black and white cinematography, making it difficult to distinguish some of the characters, especially the men, because they're all wearing similar tuxedos. The acting performances being hit or miss, possibly due to the writing. Despite these criticisms, I acknowledge that this was made well enough. So the setting, this old dark house during the storm with a power outage is good. The inheritance, the two women claiming to be Doris, and the subsequent murder, I like that for the concept. I think Grapewin as the patriarch and the various guests are good red herrings with greed as a primary motive. I also think the investigators here of Kelsey and Morris they're very competent. And the plot device here that I also am a big fan of, the tunnel access, even if it is underutilized. Then I have some specific criticism here is that it's very generic. It doesn't feel as original compared to other films of the time. The black and white coupled with similar looking men in tuxedos, like I was saying, that makes it hard to kind of distinguish who's who sometimes. Underutilization of the old dark house elements, particularly the tunnel, could have been used more effectively. I think the acting and writing, some of the performances are inconsistent, potentially due to the script. So for me, I end up giving this one a 5 out of 10, so I even came up a little bit higher since the last one, is that this one, if you're kind of looking for that second or third level of films, I mean, there was only 25 that I could find from this year, so there's that. So like this one, though, if you're kind of wanting to scratch the surface a little bit more in the 1930s, so like I said, for One Frightened Night, I have as a 5 out of 10. And then coming in at my penultimate spot on this part of the list at 22 is going to be The Crime of Dr. Crespi. This one is a feature review that I did back on episode 288. And this one here is directed by John H. Auer and starring Eric von Stroheim, Dwight Fry, and Harriet Russell. This was also inspired by the Edgar Allan Poe story of premature burial. So for this one here, we have a crazed scientist who invents a serum that induces a catatonic state, allowing him to paralyze his enemies and bury them alive. The story revolves around Dr. Andre Crespi, who is von Stroheim, who is in love with Estelle Gorham Ross, portrayed by Russell, but she is married to his best friend, Dr. Stephen Ross, who is portrayed by John Bond. After Dr. Ross is in a car accident, Dr. Crespi is called to save him, but he instead uses his serum to put Dr. Ross in a suspended animation, planning to bury him alive and make him suffer. So for me, the highlights here are the updated cinematic take on a Poe story and possibly the first film to do so, of at least this tale. It also incorporates elements of a mad scientist story. I also noted here that this explores themes of like a love triangle, unrequited love leading to devious plans, and ethics of medical profession. I also think for the acting, von Stroheim's portrayal of Dr. Crespi is diabolical, even though I think it would be slightly softer baseline for the character if they would have made him a little bit more terrifying and kind of given him a little bit more, just develop it just slightly a bit, from what we got. So Fry was pretty solid here, along with Paul Guilfoyle, as they play Dr. Thomas and Dr. John Arnold, Dr. Crespi's employees who face a dilemma. The filmmaking is considered fine by me, but limited, with the Taft Clinic modern feel and the graveyard being notable settings. So in conclusion here, I think that this is a solid update of the Poe story, and von Stroheim's performance is solid. Despite some limitations, the film's terrifying premise of suspended animation and live burial, along with the sub-hour runtime, makes this an interesting watch for fans of early cinema and deeper cuts. This one, though, I gave it a 6 out of 10, so yeah, another bump up here in rating. And then coming in at this last spot here is going to be number 21, Demon of the Himalayas. So this one is a German-Swiss film the original title is Der Dämon des Himalaya, directed by Andrew Martin. This one here I found to be intriguing due to it's an early foreign production and title, initially hoping that it might be an early Yeti film. I'll get into it if it's not or not here in a second. But for me, this is a expedition searching for the mythical demon in the Himalayas, or actually trying to get to the top of the Himalayas, I think is what they're really trying to go for more. We have Dr. Norman, portrayed by Gustav Diesel, is an entomologist, possesses a mask of the terrifying demon Kalimata. This is a mountain creature that is supposed to attack travelers if they deem them not worthy or something along those lines. His fiancée, Anne, portrayed by Erika Danhoff, is terrified by it. Dr. Norman joins an expedition led by Professor Willy, portrayed by Gunther Oscar Die Heinfurth, accompanied by his wife Ellen, portrayed by Jarmila Martin, and several others. They plan to travel to India here, where Ellen is seemingly left behind, and Dr. Norman receives a medal for protection from a young woman at a temple. The group encounters setbacks, including a local stealing their petrol and Dr. Norman falling into a deep depression. After Anne writes to say that she destroyed the mask, the group progresses seems to improve as they near the Golden Throne, which is the top of the mountain. However, a more difficult and possible supernatural challenge awaits them. So for this one, I don't necessarily consider this to be horror by modern standards, suggesting this is actually more of kind of like an adventure film with horror elements. The supernatural occurrences could be interpreted as the psychological effects of extreme conditions or hallucinations, especially given Dr. Norman's depression. So Dr. Norman as the lead character is fascinated by the Himalayas, but his fiancée fears the Kali Mata mask, foreshadowing his later struggles. He experiences depression during the journey, leading to like temporary disappearance from the narrative. So they have challenges on this expedition as they face like sabotage from a local who steals their petrol and a mysterious force that seems to push climbers off the mountain. Dr. Norman attributes this to the Kali Mata, but I kind of think that it might be more hallucination caused by his mental state and the harsh environment. So this is notable for as a potential first feature to be shot directly on the Himalayas at high altitudes. However, it feels like an extensive documentary footage. While historically interesting, hurt the pacing. Some shots could have been also filmed in the Swiss Alps from what I was reading. So there also seems to be a little bit of like German nationalism here, is that there's some early films that were from this era that were called Berg films or like mountain films in Germany, where it doesn't strongly feel like it is, but I can see it being lumped in there as well. So then filmmaking, the cinematography is good for capturing the breathtaking yet bleak scenery, the editing of documentary footage, solid framing, and early special effects, double exposure for the mask and the hand meshing with the storm. Those are definitely commendable. So then acting, the performances are they're solid. I thought that Deisel fall showing, Range as Dr. Norman and Martin as Jarmila Martin as notable as Ellen. So for me, I find this to be fascinating more for its historical significance and unique production than its pure horror experience. It offers a compelling and unsettling atmosphere through its exploration of isolation, mental decline, and power of nature, making it a worthwhile watch for those interested in cinematic evolution and early filmmaking. And so for me, I gave Demon of the Himalayas a 6 out of 10. Let me go ahead and rest my voice, see if I can get everything, there kind of cleared and get back to normal. And I will kick off my top 20 horror films from 1935.
Welcome to Camp Cringe, streaming on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
The school bus arrives at Camp Sawiki Wiki for its annual summer camp.
What the hell is your problem, lady? Do you need something, or are you just trying to ruin my vibe?
My name is Tony. Are you hurt?
You kids shouldn't be out here playing with fire.
Does anyone else see that creepy lady following Nevea? Or is it just me?
Yo, what is that noise?
Remember, God is watching.
Welcome to Camp Cringe, man. We're so screwed.
New episodes every 25th of the month.
And welcome back. So let me go ahead and we'll kick off this section of the list, which is going to be my 20 through 11. And that's going to start with Murder by Television. So this was a featured review back on episode 286. And this one is directed by Clifford Sanforth and written by Joseph O'Donnell. It stars Bela Lugosi, June Collier, and Huntley Gordon. So the synopsis here is that James Hoagland, an inventor of a new method for instantaneous worldwide television signal transmission, refuses to sell his invention to companies. Kind of ahead of its time if you're actually thinking about it for the 30s. So this company then sends agents to acquire the invention by any means necessary. During the live television presentation of his technology, Professor Hoagland is murdered. The prime suspect is Dr. Arthur Perry, who is portrayed by Lugosi, who was in the control room, or he was supposed to be, but was not at that time. The chief of police, Nelson, investigates with the aid of Arthur, but Arthur's suspicious behavior is noted. Other suspects include Dr. Henry M. Schofield, a rival and media tycoon. There's Donald M. Jordan and Mendoza. And Ah Ling, the butler, who knows a lot about television and its technology, making him another potential suspect. So something of note here is that this moves at breakneck speed with a runtime of 53 minutes. This could have benefited from slowing down just a bit to help develop the characters more. So this is also an intriguing time capsule due to its exploration of television as a novelty medium for the 30s and the dangers of new technology, especially the concept of television being weaponized. Kind of an interesting little concept if you think about it now, where we are using the news and stuff as a way of influencing people. So this is a murder mystery with several suspects, corporate rivalry as a central theme. I found this aspect of the story to work well despite the the short runtime, the reveal does feel like a cheat to me. So regarding the acting here, I would say Lugosi's performance is pretty solid, with a character, appearing suspicious. Collier and George Meeker are also good leads. Charles Will Haley's character serves as a catalyst for the plot. The acting in general is, fitting for the film, doesn't necessarily do anything to fully stand out. I would say that for the filmmaking quality, it's difficult to assess due to the washed out print. The cinematography and editing were fine, particularly in showing the telecast. The effects were minimal and the soundtrack was adequate but not outstanding. Found to have some good elements here, particularly its use of technology that's now commonplace, and the terrifying idea of weaponizing it. Despite being a decent murder mystery, this feels like it needed a little bit more character development and a cleaner print to be more enjoyable. So for me, I think this is one that I would recommend to people that want to delve a little bit deeper in the 1930s horror, or if you're kind of working through Lugosi's filmography, as I gave Murder by Television a 6 out of 10. Then coming in at number 19, I have The Dead Speak. So this one here goes by the original title of Los Muertos Hablan. This is a Mexican film that was directed by Gabriel Soria and written by Emilio Fernandez Soria and Pedro Zapina. It stars Julian Solar, Amelia de Alicia, and Manuel Noriega. So this centers around a medical student of Eduardo Molina, portrayed by Solar, and his professor Jimenez, portrayed by Noriega. They invent a machine that can see the last image imprinted on the retina of a dying person's eyes. They use this invention to help the police solve a complex homicide case, but they do this without really kind of having the authority to do that. So what's kind of interesting here, this is a very similar concept to Dario Argento's Four Flies on Grey Velvet and even Wild Wild West, as they both utilize this idea of the last image being imprinted on the retina. I do know this is like pseudoscience and actually doesn't work this way, but I like it being used. Professor Jimenez's theories are initially met with skepticism and mockery by his students and superiors, leading to Eduardo to commit crimes by stealing recently deceased bodies to prove their theory. So this aspect of body snatching draws comparisons as well to the Burke and Hare events. This is kind of a dark mad scientist film from Mexico, though I wouldn't necessarily overtly call it horror by today's standards. Now, the cinematography and framing are fine for its era, and the soundtrack is fitting, not particularly outstanding. The acting performances are generally fine, with Noriega and Solar leading the way there. So this is one that if you can understand Spanish or are interested in a deeper dive into films from the specific year or era, I would recommend it then. So the copy that I watched, the subtitles weren't great. I actually think the next time I'll give this one a rewatch, I'm going to generate my own subtitles, because I'm pretty sure that the copy I had, there was some issues there with it, and I'm not fully sure if I already ran that program or not for it. But for me, I gave this one a 6 out of 10 as well, and this would be The Dead Speak. And if you I forgot to say, if you would like to hear a featured review, that's going to be on episode 294 for The Dead Speak. And then coming in at number 18 is going to be Mystery of the Ghastly Face. So this one here was a featured review on episode 293. This is also a Mexican film from 1935, and then this one goes by the original title of El Misterio del Rostro Palladio. This was written by Juan Bastillo Oro. It stars Carlos Villegas, Beatriz Ramos, and Natalia Ortiz. So this involves and centers around Dr. Forti, who's portrayed by Villegas, and his son Pablo, portrayed by Joaquin Biscuits, who are conducting experiments to cure a mysterious illness. After initial failures, they embark on an expedition to the jungle to study an indigenous medicine. 8 years later, Dr. Forti returns without Pablo, and strange events begin to occur in the old house, leading Pablo's fiancée of Angelica, portrayed by Ramos, to believe she is being haunted by his ghost. The truth about a masked individual and Dr. Forte's growing madness are eventually revealed. So this one is weird and interesting as another early mad scientist film, but with a different take on Dr. Forte's experiments, initially aimed to help people take a darker turn as he descends into madness due to failure and loss of his son. So the mysterious illness at the heart of the story is actually leprosy. At least that's what I think I read. And that's particularly eerie, because that's one that just makes me feel unsettled in real life. So we have an unsettling opening image of a mask, which is later worn by a character. I appreciate Villegas' performance as the driven Dr. Forti and the gothic atmosphere created when Angelica believes that she's being stalked. This is a little bit boring and dialogue heavy, especially when dealing with poor subtitles and personal fatigue. Despite these issues, the cinematography, framing, and look of the mask were good, and the soundtrack was fitting. So for me, I think this is kind of an interesting little origins of the genre type film, early Mexican cinema type thing. And I've actually seen a good handful. I've seen 3, I think, of Oro's films. This one I do think I need to watch under better conditions. Another one that I want to make sure my subtitles are better. But this one I gave a little bump up in rating here is I give The Mystery of the Ghastly Face a 6.5 out of 10. Then at position number 17 is going to be The Ghost Goes West. So this was a featured review on episode 296. And this one is Directed by Renee Clare, it stars Robert Donay, Gene Parker, and Eugene Pallett. So this one is, the synopsis is, begins in 18th century Scotland with Murdoch, who's portrayed by Donay, a womanizer from the Glory clan, cursed to haunt his family's castle after a tragic accident. In the modern day, his descendant Donald, also portrayed by Donay, is in debt and attempts to sell the castle. An American Joe Martin, portrayed by Pallett, buys it with the intention of dismantling it and reassembling it in Florida. The ghost of Murdoch travels with the castle, continuing his haunt, as he's cursed to be like this. So then there's Peggy Martin, portrayed by Parker. Joe's daughter initially mistakes Murdoch for Donald, leading to a romantic entanglement. So it's a quirky, romantic comedy, more than like a horror film. So the horror elements are pretty much played for comedies, and like the romance being like we have a ghost haunting. So some of this one, we have some themes here of like family honor, the old world meeting the modern world, like Scotland to America, and subtle commentary on capitalism and its excesses, particularly during the Great Depression. But this is a United Kingdom film, so that's, I think, kind of them a little bit poking fun at it. So Donay's dual performance of Murdoch and Donald is solid, though Donald is underdeveloped in my opinion. Parker's portrayal of Peggy and Pallett's performance are also something of note. Cinematography is typical for the era. It's very static, but the exterior of the castle, miniature work for the cruise ship in the city, and in-camera effects are appreciated for their charm. So for me on this one, if you like comedies, and especially ones from like the 30s, this one's more like a deeper dive in the era than more of like a general viewing type thing, but I gave The Ghost Goes West a 6.5 out of 10. Then at position 16 is going to be The Eternal Mask. So this one here, if you'd like to hear more, is going to be a featured review on episode 299, and this one is a German film directed by Werner Hochbaum. This goes by the original title of Die Wege Maske. I discovered this one looking for horror films from this year, and despite its dark elements and meningitis outbreak, that's kind of the only thing they really have. I wouldn't necessarily consider it full horror, but what I will say, the synopsis here, let me give you more of that. This is set in a clinic in Basel, something like that. During a meningitis outbreak, we have Dr. Jacob Dumartin, portrayed by Matthias Weimann, develops a new serum but is denied permission to use it by a superior professor, Tsurko, portrayed by Peter Peterson, because it's untested. Which, I mean, there's some ethics there that I think the superior might be right. Jacob administers it, though, on a dying patient of Adam Nigar, portrayed by Franz Schaffheitlin, who initially seems to improve but abruptly dies. Adam's wife, she's portrayed by Olga Teshaowa, blames Jacob, leading to his suspicion and a suicide attempt. He survives, but in a state of hallucination and struggles with reality. So we also have this Dr. Vent, portrayed by Tom Kra, who later discovers that Adam did not die from the serum, but an unrelated cause. However, Jacob in his despair destroyed the serum's formula and can't recall the details, so it becomes a race to help Jacob remember, because Mrs. Nigar also has contracted meningitis. So some of the themes in filmmaking here that I want to kind of just highlight here is that this is a psychological drama first and foremost. It explores Jacob's guilt-ridden depression, showing his surreal dream-like experiences with his bizarre imagery, effectively portrayed through cinematography. This highlights the eternal mask of his psychological state. I think there's some ethics here where, like, the implications of Jacob's actions, noting that he violated orders and acted illegally by using an untested serum even on a dying patient. For the acting, Weimann's performance as Jacob is a highlight for his portrayal of this well-intentioned character descending into despair. Peterson and Tashawaro, I'm butchering that one for sure, are praised as well, as they're driving Jacob to madness. So the cinematography effectively captures the clinic setting and Jacob's journey through his suicide attempt, utilizing in-camera effects and a mask. The soundtrack is fine, not particularly standing out. So this one, I would recommend to those who want kind of a blend of like a realistic threat. It's actually kind of interesting watching this post-pandemic, as we have this like meningitis outbreak here, and this like a surrealist psychological drama, as it's definitely playing with like German expressionism. So my rating here then for The Eternal Mask, I'm giving this one as well a 6.5 out of 10. And now we're in the top 15, and we're going to start with Airhawks, which was a featured review on episode 298, and for this one here is directed by Albert S. Rogel, and it stars Ralph Bellamy, Tala Birel, and Victor Killian. So this one, found it because, again, looking for 1935 horror films, and it's listed like that on IMDb, but Letterboxd does not agree. I think this is more of a sci-fi with industrial espionage, but still going to include it because of it's listing on IMDb. So the synopsis: a small independent air delivery service led by Barry Eldon, portrayed by Bellamy, is trying to secure a mail delivery contract against a larger company. I think this is actually for like the U.S. mail, something along those lines, but the larger company, represented by Victor Arnold, portrayed by Douglas Dumbrell, and Bruin Dorian, portrayed by Robert Middlemass, attempts to buy out Eldon's company. When that fails, they resort to sabotage using a death ray machine developed by Professor Shutter, portrayed by Edward Van Sloan, which causes planes to explode in mid-flight. We have René Dupont, portrayed by Burrell, is introduced as a plant by Arnold, and Druin is, softening up Barry, but she eventually becomes a double agent. So we have some themes here and things that I want to kind of highlight. There's capitalism and industrial espionage. This explores the struggle of a smaller company against a larger, more powerful one that resorts to sabotage when it cannot compete fairly. And we're also kind of seeing that this other company has so much money that they can kind of go out on a limb to do some of these things. There's some early sci-fi horror here with this death ray, as it proceeded in this huge popularity in the 1950s. So that's kind of a fun thing here, because this is preceding it by almost 15 years. We have the femme fatale archetype. DuPont's character is seen as an early iteration of that and becomes prominent in film noir, I think here in the next decade. The commercial aviation idea. This is touching on the emergence of this post-World War II. This is before World War II, so, there's also kind of that. But the acting performances, Ralph Bellamy is good in his lead role. Burrell is effective playing both sides. I would say Killian is good for comic relief. There's Dumbrill and Middlemass and Van Sloan are also solid for their villainous roles. There's also a real pilot in this one as well that I kind of thought was cool, that he got to kind of highlight some of his stuff. The aerial scenes are great, filmed with real planes, and that's a strong point, as the grounded approach to the death ray effects are as well. So this one's a kind of fascinating glimpse into 1930s filmmaking, blending early sci-fi and industrial espionage, and recommended for those who appreciate this era of cinema or kind of intrigued by some of these mixing of genres. So my rating here for Airhawks, 6.5 out of 10 as well. And then coming in at position 14 is going to be Maria Martin, or The Murder in the Red Barn. This was a featured review on episode 304, and what I will say is that this is directed by Milton Rosmer and stars Todd Slaughter, Sophie Stewart, and DJ Williams. So this one, once again, found because of, compiling this list. It's listed on Letterboxd, not on IMDb. I'm still going to include it, and I'll kind of get into why here in a second. But set in 1820s rural England, the story follows Maria Martin, who is portrayed by Sophie Stewart, who is tricked into marriage by a villainous squire of William Corder, portrayed by Slaughter. And when she becomes pregnant and disappears, a Romani man named Carlos, portrayed by Eric Portman, is blamed. So some of the themes and stuff that I want to highlight is going to be social class and prejudice, as this explores societal divide between the wealthy squire and the Romani character, highlighting the prejudice faced by Carlos. Maria's father, Thomas, portrayed by DJ Williams, disapproves of Maria's interest in Carlos due to racism. There's manipulation and deception here, as Corder uses his wealth, status as a squire, and position as a local magistrate to manipulate Maria and the townspeople. His gaslighting is a significant element. So there's some true crime inspiration. Is this actually based on a real crime that happened in England? They do take some liberties, as Maria might not have been as clean cut as she is in this story, and maybe she was actually much closer in age to the Corder character. I'm not going to judge either way, but does have a stage play feel, as this actually started out as a theater play, and there's also limited sets and how the story is crafted. It definitely is taking inspirations from the stage productions. So this is actually a character study, though, particularly of Corder, whose respectable facade gives away to a villainous true nature. Maria's journey from a naive woman who is one to insert herself is also highlighted. Slaughter is commendable here as a portrayal of the villainous Corder. Stewart portrays Maria, and DJ Williams delivers a performance as a harsh yet loving father. Portman is also noted as genuinely caring for Maria. So then this one, I would acknowledge that the technological limitations of the time, but I think the framing and cinematography also work. The appreciation here of how this captures the 1820s era, the music and sound design, neither stand out nor detract from this. So I think this is a compelling, tragic narrative of deception and manipulation, despite its apparent stage origins and technological limitations. I think it gives and conveys its setting and plot very well enough. Now, the character performances are pretty strong here, especially Slaughter's, that elevate the story, making this an engaging watch that blends character study with a gripping true crime-inspired plot. So my rating here is going to be a bump up in rating, as I give Maria Martin, or The Murder in the Red Barn, a 7 out of 10. And then coming in at position 13 is going to be The Mystery of Edwin Drood. This was a featured review on episode 297, and this one is directed by Stuart Walker and starring Claude Rains. And then we also have Douglas Montgomery and Heather Angel. So the synopsis is John Jasper, portrayed by Rains, an opium-addicted choir master obsessed with Rosa Budd, portrayed by Angel. Now, she is engaged to Jasper's nephew, Edwin Drood, the titular character here, who's portrayed by David Manners, but she develops feelings for Neville Landless, portrayed by Montgomery. Edwin mysteriously disappears, leading to a murder mystery where Neville is the prime suspect. So, this is actually based on an unfinished novel by Charles Dickens. So kind of look at some of these characters here. John Jasper, our main character here, a choir master with a dark opium-addicted side. It's kind of interesting is that we see him in this thing, and then we realize that he is a choir master after that. Kind of an interesting way to give his framing. He also has an unhealthy obsession with Rosa, and I think Rains is actually pretty solid here. Now we'll go over to Edwin Drood, who is Manners. Now, the title character, who disappears midway through the film, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I kind of like what they're doing there. We have Rosa Budd, who is Angel, the catalyst for the plot, torn between Edwin, Neville, and John's obsession. She does lack depth, unfortunately. That's one of my big issues here. We also have Neville Landless, portrayed by Montgomery, a hot-headed newcomer who falls for Rosa immediately and becomes a prime suspect in Edwin's disappearance because they get into a fight pretty quickly, like upon him arriving in this town, and then there's actually kind of an interesting scene right before the poor man disappears. But Montgomery's performance is praised. We also have Helena Landless, portrayed by Valerie Hobson, Neville's sister, who tries to prove his innocence, but she is underutilized. So some themes here, we have unrequited love and the anger that festers from it. I think that for filmmaking, this does well in capturing the small town atmosphere and highlights the effective editing used to depict John's surreal nightmares and disturbed psyche, especially when he is using opium. I would say the acting performances, particularly from Rains and Montgomery, some of the stronger aspects. This is a solid, though, compelling, surprisingly bleak murder mystery that is well worth a watch for fans of early horror and classic adaptations, especially for lesser discussed titles. So my rating here for The Mystery of Edwin Drood, I give this one a 7 out of 10. And then the penultimate movie for this section of the list is going to be Mark of the Vampire at number 12. So this one here, if you'd like to hear a featured review, is going to be episode 284. And this is one I was excited to check out here because this is directed by Todd Browning and stars Lionel Barrymore, Elizabeth Allen, and Bela Lugosi. So the synopsis is a nobleman is murdered and a professor of the occult blames vampires, but not as all as it seems. This introduces us as to a shadow-drenched European village with local superstitions about vampires. So a bit more of the plot. We have Sir Carol Boroton is murdered, and the strange nature of the wounds lead Professor Zellin, portrayed by Barrymore, to suggest the supernatural. While Inspector Newman, portrayed by Lionel Atwill, that legendary actor as well, tries to find a rational explanation. The story involves Count Mora, portrayed by Lugosi, and his daughter Luna, portrayed by Borland, from a nearby castle, blurring the lines between the supernatural and rational, including the use of hypnosis. I think actually Todd Browning originally wrote the story, and that was... Yeah, the original title was The Hypnotist, which was a short story. But this one does well at subverting expectations of the vampire genre. So then this also reunites Browning and Lugosi, who had previously played Dracula for Universal. This MGM production features Lugosi paying homage to his previous role. And I think this is supposed to be a sequel of some sorts. I don't recall necessarily there. So I'm not going to spoil the reveal, but I don't necessarily love it though either. It is characteristic of the era's tendency to favor logical explanations over supernatural ones. I will just kind of leave that there. I do think that Barrymore and Atwill are great in their performances and their chemistry. Elizabeth Allen is noted for her portrayal as the conflicted daughter, Irina. Lugosi and Borland are solid in their minor roles, with Lugosi's presence likely a name draw. Not as well shot as Dracula, but I think it effectively captures this isolated, timeless village atmosphere. Cinematography and framing are good, but limited effects, like the bats, are cheesy. I mean, this is something, though, that'll be plaguing cinema for decades to come still. I do have some issues with the transformation scene, as it feels like it's a cheat to sway the audience, but the soundtrack and design contribute to the atmosphere. I'd recommend this to fans of the cast, director, or the era of filmmaking. MGM, I give them a little bit of cheekiness here for intentionally playing with audience expectations by featuring Browning and Lugosi in a vampire film, but for me, I give this one as well a 7 out of 10. And the last film for this part of the list is going to be Phantom Ship. This was a featured review on episode 285, and I had originally found this one because of it featuring Bela Lugosi, and then I also realized there's an alternate title, which is The Mystery of the Mary Celeste. This is directed by Dennis Cliff, and then I also know there's a real-life mystery behind this ship. So during a severe storm at sea, the crew of the ship, the Mary Celeste, realizes that there's a murder among them. Now, the film begins with the ship preparing to depart. Short-on crew Captain Benjamin Briggs, who's portrayed by Arthur Margetson, brings his new wife, Sarah, who's portrayed by Shirley Gray, creating a love triangle with Captain Jim Moorhead, who is portrayed by Clifford McLaglen. Now, his first mate is Toby Bilson, who is portrayed by Edmund Wilford, and he recruits sailors, including Anton Lorenzen, portrayed by Lugosi. Now, he was previously thought to be dead, and we see he's a little bit unstable. So the real-life connection here is that this borrows from the true mystery of the brigantine Mary Celeste, which was found abandoned in 1872. And then this offers a possible explanation for the ship's fate, contrasting it with the real-life theories like the captain thinking the ship was sinking or potentially insurance fraud. So this is a early production from Hammer, and I enjoy their work kind of in general. And then I also like this isolated setting on the ship at sea, which naturally creates paranoia and tension, making it easy for characters to turn into madness. I also appreciate stories set in environments, especially when coupled with characters that have past traumas. There's also some superstitious stuff here, like the women being bad luck at sea, while the film doesn't explicitly mention it. There's also some superstition that has been grounded explanation, like the isolation can make people disregard norms, especially a ship full of men and one woman. The film also plays with the audience's knowledge of the Mary Celeste as a famous ghost ship, creating a sense of foreboding. And then the acting performances here, I thought that Lugosi as Anton was one of his better performances, showing a good progression from down on his luck to unstable. Then we also have Shirley Gray, who is portraying Sarah. Her character needed more development and felt primarily there to complicate the voyage as a woman. I would say that Margetson, who is portraying Captain Briggs, and then Edmund Willard portraying Toby Bilson, both they're just fine. And then in general, the characters are not well developed, a flaw attributed to the writing, making it difficult to remember the individual sailors. So I would also go ahead and say here that this is kind of like a very, very early slasher film in the fact that we have people just getting picked off, mostly off screen to preserve mystery. It's effective in building a claustrophobic atmosphere, limited but unnecessary as the film focuses more on situational tension. So we have limited effects, that is. Soundtrack was fine. Enjoyable inclusion of a sailor's music and singing. So this is interesting for exploring a possible reason behind the real ghost ship mystery in its early cinematic setting on a boat. The acting is solid, but the lack of character development is a drawback. Despite this, the cinematography, framing, and music contribute to capturing the ship's atmosphere. I also recommend this to fans of like early Hammer studio films, acknowledging that it's not a great one, but is enjoyable. I enjoyed my time with it well enough, I would say. So my rating here for The Phantom Ship is actually going to be a 7 out of 10. So let me go ahead, rest my voice a little bit more, and let me get you over to my top 10 horror films from 1935. And I have a great offer here that I wanted to go ahead and extend to all you listeners out there for oldglory.com. This is a place where you can get over 300,000 items for music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture fans, featuring officially licensed merch from iconic bands and top sports teams. Discover your perfect fan gear and save with my exclusive discount. And that is going to be Cinephile 1. But here you get a 15% discount off of any product, and this is exclusive for something that I'm doing and for what has been offered to me. And I mean, this has things like artists here, Bob Marley, the Beatles, Grateful Dead, the Rolling Stones, Metallica, and more. We also have sports fans have stuff here for your favorite teams with official gear from the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, and NCAA, showcasing your team pride in style. And they even have some stuff here that celebrate, entertainment, TV shows, movies, lifestyle brands, and it means some quirky gifts to fan favorite apparel. There's something for everybody. With free standard shipping and same day order processing, Old Glory delivers fast and reliable service with every purchase. Whether shopping for yourself or looking for a perfect gift, Old Glory is your one-stop shop for iconic, high-quality merch that reflects your love for music and sports, as well as like pop culture. And I mean, kind of just running ththrough some of this stuff. This is a family-owned superstore since 1969. They're known for their quality and customer service. You can get exclusive selection of graphic tees, hoodies, hats, and accessories. Represent your favorite sports team with official fan gear. Discover quirky gifts, like I was saying, and fun pop culture apparel. Perfect place to shop for, this type of stuff. And there's a vast selection of entertainment-themed products, including movies and TV shows if you're not necessarily into some of the other things. And enjoy reliable and fast service with Old Glory's commitment to customer satisfaction, the ultimate source for high-quality, licensed fan merchandise for all ages. Like I said, my promo code is going to be Cinephile1, all one word. So if you're kind of interested, go ahead and check out their website here in my show notes, as I'll have I actually have more details down there for you as well. And welcome back one last time here for this. So my number 10 film is going to be Condemned to Live. This is a featured review that was on episode 289. So this was directed by Frank R. Strayer and was written by Karen DeWolf. This stars Ralph Morgan, Pedro de Cordoba, and Maxine Doyle. So after a series of murders, a man discovers his mother was bitten by a vampire bat during pregnancy and fears he may be cursed. So this one starts in the past, where we have Martha, who is pregnant, and she is with Franz Christian and John Maine, facing danger from natives who fear a cave with bats. That's where they're hiding out. This then jumps into the future where we have Professor Paul Kristen, portrayed by Ralph Morgan, lives in a small town experiencing a series of murders. There's Dr. Anders Bizet, who's portrayed by D. Cordoba, is called in to investigate. As the townspeople suspect a vampire due to the victims being drained of blood, Paul begins to believe that he is the killer after learning about his mother's incident from his adopted father, Dr. Duprez. Now, his assistant, Zan, who's portrayed by Misha Auer, and Marguerite Main, portrayed by Doyle, are in love with Paul and they try to help him. So this offers an interesting grounded take on the vampire myth. Exploring whether the killer is supernatural or suffering from mental illness is also delves into like the duality of man, similar to the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story, where the villain is the normal member of society until nightfall. Mob mentality and prejudice are also touched upon. As the townspeople focus on Zan, who is a hunchback as a suspect, a love triangle exists between David, portrayed by Russell Gleason, Marguerite, and Paul. So Morgan's performance as Professor Paul Kristen is noted as the best, especially as he grapples with the possibility of being the killer. D. Cordoba is solid as Paul's friend working with the police. Doyle and Gleason also contribute to the story. So the cinematography and framing are considered adequate, with the use of like caves adding to the mythical aspect. Effects are minimal, but not necessarily. The soundtrack, particularly the drums in the beginning, effectively create tension. So for me, I thought this was kind of a gem for the era. I praise its deeper ideas, such as the grounded approach to the vampire monster, the dangers of mob mentality, and judging those who are different. This also runs just over an hour, so you're kind of just in and out, and you'll get that story told. So my rating here for Condemned to Live is going to be a 7 out of 10. And then coming in at position number 9 here, I have The Invisible Ray. This one I've actually watched a few years ago. I'm not really sure when, but it would have been right around like getting out of college. I was kind of working through some of those like multi-pack DVDs and everything like that. But this one here, I did a mini review on episode 274. And the kind of premise here is that this is directed by Lambert Hillier. This stars Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and Francis Drake. Now, this follows a scientist by the name of Janos, portrayed by Karloff, who discovers and is exposed to the radiation of a new element called Radium X. This exposure leads him to become murderous. So, Janos proves his theory about rays from the Andromeda Galaxy to fellow scientist Sir Francis Stevens, who's portrayed by Walter Kingsford, and then we also have Dr. Felix Benet, something like that, who is portrayed by Lugosi. They invite him to an expedition to Africa while he discovers Radium X, but he also suffers from radiation poisoning that causes him to glow and accidentally kill his dog. So Felix creates a serum that manages the radiation, but Janos descends into madness, believing that all others are stealing his glory, and his wife Diana, portrayed by Drake. He then plans to eliminate everybody who is on this expedition. So some of the themes and like analysis here is I like how we're blurring the lines of villain, presenting Janos as shades of gray rather than just purely evil. His defensiveness stems from him not being able to be accepted into the scientific community, his social awkwardness, and the film also describes this almost like an early slasher film due to Janos' ability to systematically kill the expedition members using his radiation as a weapon. So Karloff, his performance as Janos is a highlight as the best here, effectively portraying a well-meaning character driven to madness. Lugosi's role as a good guy is noted, and his character arc of accepting and including Janos is appreciated. Performances from Frank Lawton portraying Ronald, Drake as Diana, Violet Kebbell Cooper, who portrays Mother Rook, and then Bela Bondi, who portrays Lady Arabelle. They're also mentioned being here for me being solid. So the cinematography and framing are commendable for capturing the isolated manner and the various settings. The special effects for the Ray and Janos glowing are limited by the era, but they possess a certain charm. The soundtrack is fine, is not particularly outstanding. So for this one, it's an interesting little film from both filmography from Karloff and Lugosi. This is also kind of a lesser talked about Universal horror film. I give this one though a 7.5 out of 10. And then at number 8, I have Dante's Inferno. This one was a featured review on episode 306, and this is directed by Harry Lockman, stars Spencer Tracy, Claire Trevor, and Henry B. Walthall. It is a drama that tells the story of Jim Carter, who's portrayed by Tracy, a carny who builds a gambling empire, neglecting his family in the process. So, now while not strictly a horror film, it does contain elements that could be considered terrifying, including a depiction of hell inspired by Dante Alighieri's epic poem of the same name. The Divine Comedy, I think, is the overall thing, but this is a section of it. So, this is noted for its social commentary on capitalism, corruption, and greed, a theme that shares with the 1924 version, which this one seemed to kind of borrow elements, almost being like a, at the time, modern modern remake. So Spencer Tracy's performance as Jim Carter is highlighted as a compelling character study showcasing his rise and eventual downfall due to his ambition. Claire Trevor and Whitehall also deliver strong supporting performances despite the technological limitations of the time. The cinematography is well executed, particularly in its depiction of hell. I love that portion of it. And this uses what practical effects it needs effectively, especially when kind of a tragedy happens in this one. So this one I think is a poignant moral fable about unchecked greed and ambition, and I give this version of Dante's Inferno a 7.5 out of 10. And then coming in at position number 7 is going to be The Raven. So this one is another one that I also watched ahead of doing the podcast and then came back to it here with a mini review on episode 272. And for this one here this is directed by Lou Landers and stars Karloff as well as Lugosi. It centers around Dr. Richard Volin, portrayed by Lugosi, a brilliant surgeon with a morbid obsession with Edgar Allan Poe's works and torture instruments. He saves the life of a young socialite of Jean Thatcher, portrayed by Irene Ware, and becomes dangerously obsessed with her. Meanwhile, an escaped criminal, Edmund Bateman, portrayed by Karloff, seeks Dr. Volin's help to change his appearance, but Volin deforms him and uses his plan to eliminate those who stand in his way to the desire for Jean. So kind of Poe's influence here is Dr. Volin's deep obsession with Poe, noting his collection of his works, his recitation of the Raven poem, and his creation of a real-life torture device from Poe stories in his basement dungeon. This also suggests that he might be modeling his life after Poe, particularly for his unrequited love for Jean, mirroring the themes of loss in Poe's epic, or his poem of Lenore. So both Karloff and Lugosi are good in their performances. Lugosi particularly noted for his, role as a mad scientist. We have Lester Matthews as the lead hero, and he kind of falls a little bit short here, sharing the screen with the two legends. Ware and Samuel S. Hines are also kind of fitting for their roles. So for this one, there's a lot of technological limitations in the filmmaking. It's also early cinema. I do like the cinematography and framing for capturing the secrets of the house. The dungeon setting is particularly admirable there. The overall design and soundtrack are fine without being outstanding. So for my kind of overall impressions here, this is a solid concept. I enjoy how Poe's stories and elements of his life are used to develop the narrative. The meta feel of Dr. Volin's extreme fandom is appreciated. The acting of Karloff and Lugosi along with the setting are highlights for me as well. So this one I would recommend to people interested in the classic Universal Poe adaptations, because this is another one of those lesser talked about ones. I'm pretty sure this is on the same set that I have with The Invisible Ray, but I end up giving The Raven a 7.5 out of 10. Then up next here at number 6, just missing on the top 5, is going to be Mad Love. So this is a feature review on episode 282, and I'm pretty sure I've watched this one twice. I think the first time I just watched it as a first-time watch, and then I think I watched it again with the audio commentary on. I don't remember necessarily. It might be in my notes here, but this one is directed by Carl Freund. It stars Peter Lorre, Francis Drake, and Colin Clive. And this one is a remake or a reimagining of the story from the hands of Orlok, and a variation of the source material also inspired The Beast with Five Fingers. So this is set in Paris, centers on Dr. Gogol, portrayed by Lorre, a demented surgeon obsessed with British actress Yvonne Orlok, portrayed by Francis Drake. When Yvonne's concert pianist husband Stephen, who's played by Clive, has his hands mangled in a train crash, Dr. Gogol secretly replaces them with the hands of a recently executed murderer named Rollo, who had a talent for knife throwing. So this one is an interesting adaptation because it focuses more on Dr. Gogol as an obsessed villain and less on Stephen's descent into madness compared to the other version that I've seen. Dr. Gogol's obsession here, some of the key kind of themes, is his obsession with Yvonne is portrayed as toxic masculinity. His madness is intensified when he discovers Yvonne is married and takes home a wax figure of her. He performs a surgery on Stephen, hoping it will lead to Yvonne falling for him instead. Kind of broken little idea there, and then we also have Stephen's psyche. While not primarily the focus, his struggles with his new hands is explored. This leans into the supernatural explanation for his newfound knife-throwing skills, linking them to Rollo's hands, which I kind of find interesting but less sensible compared to the doubt-driven madness from the book. For the acting, though, Laurie's performance as Dr. Gogol is a high praise. He's stoic yet conveying rage. I think that's kind of an interesting line to toe there. Drake is effective as the object of his obsession, treading lightly around him. Clive's performance as Stephen is more of a catalyst, with Yvonne trying to help him through his depression. The supporting casts are also considered solid by me. So then filmmaking, cinematography, and framing are solid as well for an early film. Notable images such as like Stephen's new hands and the reveal of Rollo. Effects are limited but not necessary, actually, as the film focuses more on the character's psyche. The sound design and music contribute well. I also, as I said, gave this a second watch with audio commentary by screenwriter and historian Steve Haberman. He provided some interesting insights into the actors' lives and works, and there's some desired scenes that would have increased the darkness, but for whatever reason, those were toned down and not put in this. So for me, I think this is an interesting take on the source material. Strong acting, especially from Lorre, as well executed filmmaking despite technological limitations. So once again, I give Mad Love a 7.5 out of 10. And I'll actually be curious, this one might actually go up in rating for me as things go along, so we shall see when I give it the next go. And then at position number 5, I have The Student of Prague. This was a featured review on episode 287. And this one also goes by the original title of Dear Student von Prague, directed by Arthur Robison, and was written by Hans Kaiser and Arthur Robison as well. And then this stars Anton Walbrook, Dorothea Wieck, and Theodore Luce. So this is the third adaptation of the source material and is described as taking its time to develop, but never boring. While interesting questions about whether their supernatural events are occurring or if it's all in the main character's head, kind of something to include there. But then the synopsis is Bolden, portrayed by Walbrook, is infatuated with the seeker Julia Wieck, who is kept by Baron Waldis, portrayed by Eric Fiedler. And then we also have Dr. Karpus, portrayed by Luce, who is jealous of the Baron, intervenes in Bolden's pursuit. Dr. Karpus makes a Faustian bargain with Bolden. If he gives up his idle dreaming side, he will become lucky. This leads to Bolden winning against the Baron in gambling and taking his carriage, setting off a chain of events that results in death and Bolden's descent into madness due to his love for Julia. So some of the key themes and elements here, we have that bargain that I brought up. Dr. Karpus serves as a devil-like figure, offering Bolden luck and success at a high price, leading to his corruption. There's a descent into madness as Bolden's confidence after the deal eventually turns into a full-blown descent into madness, fueled by supernatural occurrences and his inability to maintain Julia's affection. There's the doppelganger idea here, which there's this interesting motif with that, is that Bolden sees his double after making the deal, which contributes to his madness, especially since others around him don't see it. This explores the concepts of losing like that innocence. This is a character study mostly about Bolden as well. So the acting, I thought Walbrook is solid as Bolden, transitioning from cool to maniacal. Then we also have Wieck works as the object of desire. Luce is good as his menacing Dr. Karpus. Fiedler acts as his rich man who's the catalyst for Bolden's deal. Then we also have Edna Greif as Lydia, who is in love with Bolden, truly loves him. He did have that same feeling for her until he saw this singer. I think that the filmmaking here, the cinematography and framing are highlights, especially in showing the doppelganger. Limited in-camera effects for bringing the two versions of Bolden to life were appreciated. The soundtrack, including diegetic singing, fits the film. So this is an intriguing and well-made, borrowing that Faust legend, but offering a modern take. It is recommended for fans of 1930s foreign filmmaking, as once again, I give The Student of Prague from 1935 a 7.5 out of 10. And then at position number 4 here, we have Scrooge. This is a featured review on episode 303. And what I'll say here is that this is directed by Henry Edwards and starring Seymour Hicks. This is an adaptation, of course, of the classic story by Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. So for me, this is a concise and engaging adaptation running 78 minutes. I definitely praise Seymour Hicks' portrayal of Ebenezer Scrooge. While the film was found under the horror genre, it's more of a gothic story set in the Victorian age. There are ghosts. They're not necessarily villains. That's where it's more gothic, is that they're trying to influence the true villain here, which is Scrooge, and make him guide him to change his ways. The cinematography, lighting, framing, and sound design capture the era and the mood, despite limited special effects. I also highlight here the solid performances in the supporting cast, including Daniel Cawthron as Bob Cratchit and Robert Cochran as Fred. And I also believe that this features the voice of Claude Rains, as well as one, I think it's his actual former coworker who actually owned the place that they work at. So for me, though, I rather enjoyed this one. Because it's not full-blown horror, I'm coming in here with an 8 out of 10, and that's why it falls in this position on my list. And then another one I saw before starting the podcast and then gave it a rewatch here is going to be The Black Room. This was a mini review on episode 273. And then this one here is directed by Roy William Neal. It is written by Arthur Strawn and Henry Myers, and it stars Karloff, Maria Marsh, and Robert Allen. So this revolves around twin brothers Gregor and Anton and an ancient prophecy that states twins will mark the end of this family, specifically through a killing in the Black Room. We have Baron Gregor D. Bergman. The older brother is a ruthless and unpopular feudal lord. His younger brother Anton is away for years, and I think it's partially because of this prophecy, and he has a paralyzed right arm. Gregor faces accusations of abducting women, plans to impersonate Anton to clear his name and give his title to him, but he has a more sinister agenda. I really think Karloff is really showcasing his ability by playing both vastly different characters. The highlights here would be the concise, self-fulfilling prophecies, the issues of nobility and titles, and the dangers of a cruel leader. The Black Room itself is having these onyx walls and torture devices. I love that location there. Cinematography, framing, and costumes fit the era that this is set, because this is a period piece. While the effects were limited due to early history of cinema, the story and performances are strong. So for me, I enjoyed giving this one a rewatch, and it's kind of a lesser talked about gem in my opinion, especially if you're a fan of this era. I would give this one a go. So my rating then for The Black Room, I give this one an 8 out of 10. And then my runner-up for this list, and also the one that is the only new watch that is, it's the highest rated new watch that I have for this, is going to be Werewolf of London, featured review on episode 283. And this one is directed by Stuart Walker and starring Henry Hall, Werner Oland, and Valerie Hobson. So this film begins in Tibet, where we have Dr. Wilfred Glendon, portrayed by Hall, and Hugh Renwick, portrayed by Clark Williams, are searching for rare flower. Wilfred finds it, but then he's attacked by an animal, scarring his arm. They return to London, where Wilfred lives his life with his wife, Lisa, portrayed by Hobson, and Dr. Yogami shows up, who is portrayed by Oland. And knowing that Wilfred's trip and about the flower, he warns Wilfred that he will become a werewolf on the full moon evenings, but Wilfred dismisses it. After simulating moonlight, Wilfred sees that his arm transforms and realizes the flower is crucial. He begins a change at a party Lisa wants him to attend. 2 blooming bulbs of this flower are stolen, leading to the beastly Wilfred to a party where his wife is. So I'm also going to go ahead and say here that I do have a little bit of issues here because simulating moonlight is literally just sunlight that reflects off of the moon, but I'll digress with that. So this one doesn't receive more recognition, especially for an early incorporation of the full moon into werewolf lore, which was later expanded in The Wolfman. I also kind of note here some influences on subsequent werewolf stories, comparing its isolated setting of Tibet to Gary Bradner's The Howling Trilogy when it goes to Australia, and then also like kind of where everything's there. But a nitpick I mentioned here is regarding the moonlight as it's reflected of sun's light. That's something I've already just brought up here as well. There's an interesting variation of the man scientist genre, with Wilfred's research shifting from finding a rare flower to seeking a cure for his curse, causing marital friction. Dr. Yogami is described for me as a gray character. While not necessarily a villain, he provides crucial information and acts as to prevent harm despite his secretive nature. Hall is good in his portrayal of the stoic scientist driven to madness and jealousy. Hobson is solid as Lisa, though the character isn't fully fleshed out. Oland's performance as Dr. Yogami is also a highlight. So the effects, particularly the werewolf appearance and transformations, are impressive even for the era. The cinematography, framing, editing, sound design, like especially the wolf howls, and music are commendable. So for me, I consider this a gem that needs more love. I recommend this to werewolf fans and those who enjoy films from this era, and I give this one an 8 out of 10. So then if you know anything about this year, then this shouldn't come as a shock, but my number one film is one I've seen the most out of anything on this list. I've seen this one probably upwards of 4 or 5 times, is The Bride of Frankenstein. So on the podcast officially, I did a mini review on episode 271. I also went over on to the podcast Cinema 100, where I covered it with my buddies Robert and Will over there as well. So for this one, though, is directed by James Whale and starring Karloff, Elsa Lanchester, and Clive. So for me, I mentioned that I've seen this multiple times here. I've seen it at the Gateway Film Center for a retrospective on the big screen. I think it was like a 35mm print. I also have watched my 4K for the Universal Frankenstein box set. So this begins with Mary Shelley Lanchester revealing that Dr. Frankenstein, Clive, survived the events of the previous film, and an even crazier scientist goads Frankenstein into building a mate for his monster. So we have this prologue where Mary and her husband Percy Blissey Shelley, who is portrayed by Douglas Walton, and Lord Byron, who is Gavin Gordon, on a stormy night, where Mary tells more of the Frankenstein story. When he returns to the burnt-down windmill for the first film, where Dr. Henry Frankenstein is believed dead, but later found alive, the monster, Karloff, of course, has survived emerging from an underground cavern and causing havoc on the countryside. He then meets a blind hermit of O.P. Heggie, who teaches him, and then later encounters Dr. Pretorius, that's the other mad scientist I was talking about, who is portrayed by Ernest Thesiger, who enlists the monster's help to convince Henry to create a female companion for him. So for me, this one continues directly from the previous one with some minor changes, a little bit of continuity and adaptation stuff I'm going to bring up here. There's also this element from the novel, because this is the second half of the book, such as the monster learning to talk and the idea of a mate are incorporated, even if it's presented differently than in the actual book. So I have a slight issue here that the bride is not created until the very end, leading to an abrupt ending. This is a very universal thing to do at this time. I would have preferred her to be introduced earlier. So then we have Karloff as the monster. He is great in developing it, conveying much of the little dialogue and portrayal of the creature learning to talk like a child. The only thing is it does kind of make it hard to do anything going forward for other sequels, but if they would have ended it here, I think it would have been perfect. So Dr. Frankenstein here, Clive Good as his mad doctor, consistently portrayed on the verge of losing his sanity due to guilt. We have Elizabeth, portrayed by Hobson. Now, she's solid in her role. She's attractive, though she takes a back seat as a damsel in distress. The singer as Dr. Pretorius, I love him as a villain, fitting this role with his arrogance. Lanchester as Mary Shelley and the bride. I wish they would have had more of her. I acknowledge her limited screen time, so that's what it is. The rest of the cast are solid. So for the filmmaking, cinematography, and framing, they're also fine and crisp despite the technological limitations of the era. Effects, once again, limited, but the monster's look is preferred over the original, And then the look of the bride is also great, more in line with the novel as well there. Body count, this one actually has some rampage and resulting body count are interesting. Soundtrack fits for what was needed. So for me, I enjoy this, considering it better than the original due to the development of the monster, making it more tragic. I also credit here Karloff, Clive, Hobson, the singer, and Lanchester, and the rest of the cast for their performances. This is a well-made movie despite its limitations and when it came out and everything like that. I recommend this both to horror and non-horror fans alike, and I give it an 8 out of 10. So yeah, that's the highest rated I have here. So, not as strong as some other years. We're also so early into cinema, but that's all I have here then for my top 25 of 1935. Is there anything you would have moved around? Anything you want to give me as feedback? Anything like that? Anything I might have missed potentially, just using my limited research for what I could. If you want to, in my outro, I'm going to have how you can get a hold of me, but I'm going to go ahead, get you over to one last break, rest my voice, and then I will close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then I'll also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And so for the next episode is going to be Nightmares Film Festival. It's crazy that's already here. I think it's a little bit earlier this year than it was last year, but that'll be the feature that I do, so I'll be running through stuff like that. I'll also have a bunch of mini reviews for you ahead of that. I might need to move some things around. I'm not fully sure what I'm going to be watching. It's definitely going to be trying to knock out everything. I figured out stuff from Nightmares that I'll be able to do for my Hooptober challenge, but I'll also try to see if I can get that as completed as much as possible. So yeah, there'll be mini reviews for you on top of there, and I don't think there's anything else I need to say outside of that then for this outro, but that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending